folks, this is Darren from My RV Works. We're in Port Angeles, Washington, and what we are doing today is we're going to be troubleshooting a furnace problem. When I flip this to heat, I expect my furnace to start. And then look, I'm all the way over to 90 degrees. So there is no furnace at all. What we know about the Coleman furnace, which is different from the Dometic furnace, is the Coleman gets its power from the fuse, then it goes to the furnace, then it goes to the thermostat. Back behind here, there's a fuse. I want you to check the fuse, if we can get this off. There we go. Special RV Tech fingernail. There's a fuse right here. We're going to want to make sure that that's intact, which we've already done. If you want to find out if there's 12 volts coming here, you need to find a good power source. So we take our handy meter here, and we need a good ground. If you find a receptacle, you can just stick your in the negative, because that's ground right there. All right, and then if your arms are long enough, which mine are, we're going to put our meter on DC. So I've got one end on ground, and I'm going to check this fuse right here, and I have no voltage. No voltage coming to this fuse. Therefore, the thermostat won't work. Therefore, the furnace, we can assume that the furnace is not getting 12 volts because this fuse is not running. So remember, on a Coleman, it goes from the fuse panel to the furnace. Then it feeds this thermostat. The thermostat then feeds the air conditioner up top and the furnace down below. So I know what you're thinking. Well, Darren, just go check the fuse panel. So let's go check the fuse panel and see if we have a blown fuse there. Okay, we found the service panel back in the bedroom, and we open this up, and this is typically of what you might find. AC breakers on this side, DC fuses on this side. Sometimes they're separate. Sometimes they're in separate panels, but we know that the furnace is going to run off of a DC side, okay? Imagine a scenario where you're traveling from point A to point B, and it's cold. You're going to stay in your little shopping center parking lot type of thing, and you don't have shore power, and you're cold. You're going to run your furnace, okay? So that's going to come off of the DC side, the battery bank. So let's check. Here, I'm going to put that there. And there's a receptacle right here. So we're going to use our same little trick of using ground right there. I'm going to go into the ground pin of my receptacle. It's the bigger one, usually on the bottom. So now I have a ground. Here's what I know on that ground. That ground is the same ground that is every ground. So that ground bonds me to the frame of this vehicle. So all I need to do is find that ground pin on the receptacle, and one end of my meter has been grounded. Okay, so we're going to go to the DC mode on my fuse, on my meter here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check voltage. Okay, I had to wiggle my ground lead a little bit, but so I have 12.3 volts coming from my batteries. So that's fine. Okay, so I know I've got power there, and we'll just run up these little fuses right here. And what I'm doing is I'm testing right where the wires go out. Yes, I can check the fuses, but this way I know that the wire leaving the fuses is got voltage on it. I don't think that was correct English, but oh, look. Hold on, I'm not touching it. So, okay, that was okay. My ground lead and my receptacle was loose. So basically what I'm seeing here is all of these are correct. So we don't have a blown fuse. So what could the problem be? So at this point, let's actually go out to the furnace. And what we expect to see is power feeding the furnace. There are 4 wires feeding that furnace. 2 are plus and minus, and the other 2 would be the control wires, if you will. So let's go out into the furnace and check what's going on out there. This is the outside of the furnace. Not all manufacturers are going to be nice enough to give you an access panel to the furnace. Sometimes you got to pull your entire furnace out from under a cabinet just to get to the front side of it. And it's the front side of this furnace we need to get to. So we were lucky enough with this RV where we just take these screws off and we'll be able to get to the whole front side of this furnace. And when we get to the front side, we'll have all of our wires there that we need to play with. Okay? So here we go. It's a number 2 square. Oh, number 2 squares. This is their ND. I gotta take this off. Take this from here, so leave those things. And you have one. I got one. Okay. When I was young, amazing little plastic tool. You must have one. They're great because you can file them back down. But I like the plastic one because it's not going to scuff the customer's paint job. And you just kind of prise loose. Now we can get to this final elusive screw here. So we didn't have to take the furnace out of a cabinet, but this one's kind of not catching anything. Okay, now we love this manufacturer of this RV because everything's right here before us. So let's talk about what we're seeing here. I had mentioned that there are 4 wires that are feeding this furnace, and here the 4 wires are. These are the wires that are coming from the coach. I have a red, a black, and 2 blues. Red being 12 plus, which is the one we're going to check. He should come right to this stop 1, or the first stop is going to be this switch right here. The black obviously is ground. It's connected to the frame. And then these 2 blues here. These 2 blues are going to take a tour. They're going to go through the thermostat. They're going to go through my sail switch. There's a high limit thermostat on the back, and they're going to go through like an AND circuit. Sail switch needs to be made, and my high limit thermostat on the back of this thing doesn't need to be set, and my thermostat needs to be calling for heat. And if all those 3 conditions are true, then I will tell this control board to try to ignite my gas flame. So what we expect to find is 12 volts right here. So what I'm going to do is, just to get to these, I'm going to take this screw out just so I can get to the back of this. So let me change from my square bit to a Phillips bit. Okay, we'll put that one right there. All right, so here is where I expect to see 12 volts on this wire coming from the coach going directly into my reset switch. I need 12 volts on this wire right here. Now we were having an issue in the inside where we were not getting any voltage coming from this thing. So we're going to find out, we're going to hook this thing. I'm just going to hook it right there so I can see. So this is a good ground, okay? And I'm just going to touch right inside there. And I have 12 volts, okay? So I have 12 volts feeding this furnace, okay, which confirms with what we found with the fuses on the inside. So now we're going to check the other side of the switch, okay? So I have 12 volts. Oh, it was a minus on my meter, but I realized my polarity was backwards. So the switch is turning the power around. So I'm just touching ground on the frame, and I've got my meter on the opposite side of the switch, okay, and if on my meter is showing 12.3, okay. So the problem is not here. So now the next thing is this. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So this wire right here, I need a pointy thing. I'll use my pen. I don't have a pen. Oh, I have a perfect pointy thing. Here. So on this furnace, this being a Dometic, this wire right here is the one that's coming from the fuse panel, feeding this side of my switch. We're going through the switch out of this red wire, which goes into the rest of this control circuit, but then I'm leaving on this blue wire right here. Now this blue wire is the one that's going to go up and feed our thermostat on the inside. Now, do we have a bad crimp right here? Because, let's check something here. If the crimp is bad, then that might explain why it's intermittent. So I'm going to wiggle this a little bit. Okay, but you can see how this, let me unplug this. There's a trick there with my second favorite tool, the little right-angled hook. Now we got 12 volts here, so you don't want to short anything out, but if you take a right-angled hook, sometimes you can get right in there and kind of pop this guy off. You don't want to kind of pull on the wires if you can help it. There we go. So here's where the problem might be. Let's take a look inside of that. That actually looks good, but we were not getting 12 volts on the thermostat on the inside, and this blue wire is where that 12 volts comes from. So remember, I came from my fuse, going through my switch to this other side of the switch. Red wire goes into the control circuit of the board. The blue wire feeds my thermostat. So do we have a loose connection maybe? It's intermittent. I can see the blue wire going in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to get to the back side of the furnace from the inside. I'm just looking at that blue wire. because this is an intermittent problem. So I'm looking for a wire connection. Sometimes the manufacturers might change the wire color. I see right up here in the corner where all the wires go. So let's get to the back of the furnace and see if we can figure out where our 12 volts is being lost. Now, I do have another tricky meter that we can play with, okay? To play with this, I need to unplug this guy down here. So watch this trick. Okay, so I've effectively unplugged this wire, so he's kind of like a non-wire right now. And if you got some extra money hanging around, you can get yourself one of these guys right here. It is the Fluke TS90. Click on the link for a sponsor. I don't know. But what we're going to do here is this wire is going to tell us how far this goes. Okay. I don't know if the ground part's going to work. So it's telling us that wire's broken in 4 feet, 3 feet. So we have a problem 3 feet from here. 4 feet. See how it's going 4 feet? No feet. I feel like the Johnny 5, 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet. So let's ground that again. And so my problem is 4 feet away from here, the way the wire is. So we're gonna be looking for a problem right up in here, okay? And so what this meter tells me, let me show you how this meter works. Let's say I had a spool of wire. So let's look at this for example. I don't know how long this wire is, but I do know that it's not working. It's broken, for example. So I'm going to find 2 ends of it, and I'm just gonna connect this thusly, push my button, and it'll tell me that the wire's 10 feet long, or that the break is 10 feet away from where I'm located. Now, if it was a short, you'll listen, it's making a beepy sound. So that's if the wire shorted. So it's a very invaluable tool to have for troubleshooting. We'll probably make another video on all my tools. But so now I know that there is a problem and it's 4 feet away from here. Because the thermostat is probably 10 or 15 feet from here, but our problem is 4 feet from here. So we'll go to the back side of this and look around 4 feet the way the wire is for where the problem might be. So here we are on the back side of the furnace up in top, and it's up in this area that we're going to try to gain access to. It's kind of tight quarters, so we'll have fun getting in there. But remember, we're 4 feet away is where our meter told us the problem was. So another thing I'd like to do is try that same exact meter from the other side. So let me pull this out from here. All right. And what I'm going to do now is we know that the blue wire is going to be feeding this thermostat, and this thermostat's dead now. So we're going to pull this off, find that other end of the blue wire. It's not going to be blue. The manufacturer's not going to keep it that color. But we're going to see how far it says the problem is from here. And we'll kind of get that wire from both ends to try to find, to make sure that what I expect is 10, 15 feet. That side said 4 feet. I expect this side to say 10 to 15 feet. Then we know we're dealing with the right wire, and it's kind of helping us zero in on where the wire problem is. So yes, the manufacturer is not going to keep the same blue wires. They're going to use other wires, and that's pretty common. You're not going to find that exact nice, pretty 16 gauge wire running all the way up to here. So we're going to get all these little crimp connectors out. Okay, here we are. So, all right. So that's going to be ground. I believe that might be plus. The part that's tricky here is I use different colors. So what we need to do, let me go look at my book and verify color coding. And I'm going to assume that red is plus, but let me go take a second, look in my book, and find the color codes for this thermostat, and then we'll verify that this is 12 volts, for example. And if it is, then this wire here, the red with white stripe, is the one we're going to take our meter on to find out the distance between it. Okay, so after consulting with our Coleman thermostat service manual, what we have determined is that the red wire is in fact plus, feeding this whole thermostat system. Now, another thing we know is that this is being fed from the furnace, blue wire. White is a wire going from the thermostat back to the furnace, and that would make sense because look here, we've got red with white stripe and white with red stripe. They're both 16 gauge. So these two wires are the ones we're going to be working on that are coming from and to the furnace. This wire here is ground, blue is ground, so we've got red is 12 volt plus, white is furnace control, blue is ground, and then that leaves yellow green, and gray. Yellow is my compressor for my air conditioner. Green, I think, is high-speed fan or low-speed fan, and gray is low-speed fan or high-speed fan. So these are fan speeds. This is compressor, ground, furnace, and plus. So now that we know that, let's troubleshoot these wires right here. The thermostat's blue wire is ground. The thermostat's white wire goes back to the furnace on 12 volts until the furnace will start. The thermostat's red wire is 12 volts. Okay, now I've got that in ground, and I'm going to go here, and I have 0 volts. Now, confirming it's leaving the furnace at 12.3, but I'm not making it to here. So remember the trick we were going to do? Let's take this cap off. Okay, and what we want to do now is use that fancy meter here, and I'll reference ground, because I referenced ground on the furnace. So I'm going to reference ground here. Okay, so these are the 2 wires I want to use that meter on to find out. I'm expecting it to be in the 12s or 13s or 15s. So I'm going to hook, this is my Fluke TS90. Love this meter. It's really helped solve a lot of, we've got people that have left reviews for us that, oh man, he was able to find a short that no one else could find. Well, it's because I have this little gadget right here. So, 66 feet. Okay, so
66.
What is that? 6671, 6671. So I'm okay with that. Basically, the problem's not here. The problem is 70 feet away from here. Whereas before it was saying it was 4 feet away from here. So now what we've done is we said, okay, the problem's not on this end, it's away from here somewhere. So let's go back to the other side of this, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to corner this thing. One side had 4 feet, this side's got 60, 70 feet. So let's go back to the 4-foot side. Okay, so it's worth it to dig into that, even if we have to pull the furnace out to find where the wire short is. Okay, so now that we know the wire colors that we're dealing with, if you look there, you see that blue, I'm not going to point because I got the camera too far in this thing. You see the 2 blue wires feeding from the top. One says thermostat plus. They go through that harness right there, and then they leave, look, at that red with white stripe and white with red stripe. So we're going to try to gain access to that plug. It's very possible that that transition right there is where our problem is. It might have an intermittent short. There's pins inside of those little plastic connectors that may not be right. So that's what we're going to try to look at, that spot right there. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken my meter. Again, we're following the trail of 12 volts. We know that it leaves a blue wire from the furnace at 12 volts, 12.3, whatever it is, and now we're troubleshooting that harness. So as you see, I've taken my red lead and I put it in the out feed side of that plug. Okay, so if that is what we're looking for, the case here is going to be my ground. So let's connect the ground. Look, I got my 12 volts. So we've made it through the harness. We've made it through that harness. Now in getting that harness loose, I kind of pulled on it a little bit. And so let's see if, so here's what I'm saying. We have 12 volts at the red with white stripe wire at that point. Let's go up top to our thermostat and see if it's there now. We're looking for red with white stripe. Okay, so we're following the 12 volt trail. How does this look? Does this make my head look fat? Okay, so we're following the 12 volt trail, and we know that we left 12 volts on blue wire. We went through that little pluggy piece, and we were following the red with white stripe. We had it on the back side of that. Now let's try to see if we have power on this side, red with white stripe. Now what we're going to use is the same ground reference. That's kind of key. When you're troubleshooting something, you want to try to keep things the same as much as possible. So down there I had my 12 volts touching the frame of the furnace. Okay, so now let's see what I get when I touch up here. Hey! There's my 12 volts. I have 12 volts. It's upside down, but it still works. Now, let's take that ground lead. And remember, we were touching the ground lead to this ground right here, because we might have the voltage, the source wire might be fine. Maybe we have a problem with our ground, okay? Because those electrons need to find their way where they're going. So let's take the negative to white. Now we just did this test, so I'm curious what it's going to show. And Oh, I got 12 volts there. So just a little while ago, we did this test right here and it was nothing. The only thing we've done is we've moved that little connector piece, okay? So now I have 12 volts. If I connect all this together, I'm going to expect that the furnace is going to work, okay? So let's do that real quick. I'm just going to kind of connect things together real quick.
Immediately. It's already on.
The furnace has just started. So I'm going to say we have an issue with that connection down there. And so now we've kind of, when we started this thing, we didn't know exactly where the trail was going to lead us. But by following through on the troubleshooting, it led us to a weak connector. Okay, so now that we're farther down the trail, we've put some things back together. And I'm trying to get my hand in there. And we had the furnace working. And you can't hear this, but we can. There's a clicking sound going on at the thermostat. Click, 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 and all I'm doing is barely moving this. So let me try to zoom in on what I'm seeing here, if I can. Okay. What I want to try to see what I'm looking at, see how that pin does not look like it's seated all the way? Right there, where my thumb is, the blue wire. We're going to try to push that in, but definitely we found the fault. You can see how none of these other wires, the red, the black, have that pin showing. This one here's that little silver piece. That's the pin. It's not seated correctly. Okay, so that's where we found the problem. So let me try to see. I might need two hands, but I'm going to try to pull it out or push it in. Now let's look at the other side here. You can see all the pins inside. They seem seated okay. And let's see. He's the one that's on the, guess what? The red with white stripe. So everything that we've troubleshot is leading us to this problem right there. So let's look inside here. And you can see how that pin, let me change the angle, is not as far in as all the others. You see that as I'm moving this pin around? So there is the problem. There's the smoking gun. It was the inspector with the candlestick in the library. So what we're going to do is we're going to seat that pin. I'm going to need two hands to kind of push this pin in. Let me see if I can pull it out. Yeah, I'm going to need two hands. So there's your problem. So I'm going to push that back in and see. I expect good results now. Okay, so what we've done is we've pushed the pin back in. And so that little meter that told us 4 feet away, it was correct. It helped us tremendously. So as you see, I've pushed them in. So now we're going to connect. And now you see I'm doing the same test and they're all even with each other. So let's connect the harness and test the furnace. I'm sure it's going to be fixed now. Okay, so at the end of the day, we didn't have a furnace. We were playing with this thermostat. We didn't have a problem. We went to the fuses, which was where the first place would be that I would want you. Well, check this fuse first. And it's like we said, on a Coleman air conditioner system. The question might be, well, Darren, why is my air conditioner controlling my furnace? Well, there's a long and a short answer to that, but let's just say that that's how they wired it, okay? I have one single point here that is my thermostat that's checking the room temperature, and from this one location, I can either turn on my air conditioner or my furnace. And so what we found is the furnace is controlled from these two wires. We found the loose plug. We've checked our fuses, and so there we are. At the end of the day, we found what's wrong with this situation. So hope all this helps. Hope it all makes sense and I didn't confuse you with all my wiring. And if you're ever up in the Northwest, look us up if you have any problems. So happy camper, say my RV works. And this is Darren signing off from rainy Port Angeles, Washington. Bye-bye.